All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely terrifying moment in history, the Mongol invasion, and how Europe was absolutely on the brink of being completely erased. Picture this. It's 13th century Europe. You're behind massive stone walls, trusting in these heavy ironclad knights and fortified castles to keep you safe. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, a threat rolls in from the east that literally pushes the entire continent to the edge of total annihilation. So how on earth did a nomadic army pull that off? To the Western kingdoms, the Mongols were this terrifying, unstoppable mystery. People were calling them the horsemen of the devil. Well, today we're pulling back the curtain on the unmatched military genius that made them seem like a force of nature. Because, spoiler alert, it wasn't magic and it wasn't just mindless savagery. It was calculated, swift, and completely inevitable.
And you really have to understand the fatal mismatch here because it completely defined the battlefield. On one side, you've got traditional European defenses, right? Knights in heavy, lumbering armor. Slow, ponderous. But on the other side, the revolutionary Mongol cavalry. These guys were clad in leather and iron, moving with literal lightning speed. They were swift, tirelessly trained, and driven by commanders who seemed to have eyes everywhere. It was basically a clash of completely different eras, and those heavy European knights, they were just left in the dust.
But here's the thing, raw force wasn't even their biggest advantage. Beneath all the chaos of a Mongol charge was this incredibly complex intelligence web. I mean, long before the first arrow even flew, the Mongols knew exactly what they were doing. They ran this thing called the Yam, which was a revolutionary relay network of post stations and messengers stretching across their massive empire. It meant their orders actually moved faster than their armies. Add in scouts, local spies, and a whole system of battlefield drums, horns, and signal flags, and you're looking at an army operating with one synchronized mind. Meanwhile, the European commanders were basically stumbling around in the dark. And even before the swords clashed, fear was doing a lot of the heavy lifting. The Mongols were absolute masters of psychological warfare. Seriously, they would deliberately let survivors escape from their early conquests just so those people would run ahead and spread these absolute horror stories. Stories about wiped out cities and skies literally blackened by arrows. The fear always arrived before the horde did. It was so effective, sometimes didn't even fight. They just surrendered or burned their own homes down rather than face that kind of destruction. So as we move into the 1220s and then spring of 1241, this terror explodes into a full-scale catastrophe. Mongol forces come flooding into Eastern Europe, striking like ghosts. Poland gets its first real taste of the nightmare. The grand city of Krakow is totally abandoned by its prince and left completely exposed. It falls without a single fight. There's even a legend that the trumpeter who first sounded the alarm in Krakow was shot right in the throat, cutting his final note short. By the time the horde reached Breslau later that year, the locals were so panicked they just set fire to their own city and hid.
Now, if you want to see their battlefield brilliance in action, look no further than the Battle of Legnica. Duke Henry II of Silesia actually managed to scrape together this combined European army. German knights, Teutonic knights, the works. But the Mongols hit them with an absolute tactical masterclass. Step 1. Ignite the reeds on the battlefield to create a massive smokescreen, totally blinding the Europeans. Step 2, fake a retreat. They pulled those overeager knights right out of formation and into a trap. Step 3, surround and destroy. It was an absolute bloodbath. Duke Henry was killed, and they actually paraded his severed head around on a lance.
Meanwhile, as Poland is falling apart, things over in Hungary are looking just as grim. King Bela IV had put together what most people considered the best army in Europe at the time. He even teamed up with these fierce nomadic warriors called the Cumans. But man, the internal politics and sheer chaos completely poisoned their defense. In this huge disaster of a moment, the Hungarians actually assassinated the Cuman Khan. Naturally, the enraged Cumans pack up and leave, which means King Bela's forces are hopelessly fractured right as the Mongols are closing in. Which brings us to the massacre at this Sejo River. This was orchestrated by Subutai, who is honestly one of the greatest military strategists in human history. The Hungarians were locked down in this heavily fortified camp across the river. So what does Subutai do? He launches this super loud, aggressive frontal assault at the main bridge as a massive distraction. But secretly, he takes a second force downstream and quietly builds a pontoon bridge. They cross totally unseen, outflank the swamp, and just smash into the Hungarian line like a thunderclap. Honestly, it wasn't even a battle. It was a precise, savage wipeout. And I just love this detail because it shows you exactly who Subutai was.
During that very battle, some of the younger, impatient Mongol princes were actually mocking him for showing up late with reinforcements. They had taken an easy, shallow crossing and had zero clue about the monumental effort Subutai was putting in downstream, building that pontoon bridge in deep, unfamiliar water to literally save their lives. When they complained, Subutai just calmly fired back. If you claim I was slow, consider first the reason why. You've got to love the mic drop there. In the end, they honored him with mare's milk and wine, finally realizing his brain was the real weapon that won the day.
The aftermath of all this was just unfathomable. We have records from the English chronicler Matthew Paris, who chillingly wrote that the Mongols swept through Europe like a storm, leaving nothing but death and desolation behind them. Great cities like Buda and Pest were looted, their people slaughtered, and left in absolute ruins. King Bela had to run for his life, and Hungary's entire infrastructure was shattered. The writing was on the wall. This was a masterclass in conquest, and absolutely no one in Europe could stand against them.
But then, right when it looks like the entire continent is going to collapse, we hit this massive narrative handbrake. By late 1241, Eastern Europe is totally dominated. The path straight into the heart of Western Europe is wide open. But in 1242, just as they're gearing up to push into places like Croatia, some crucial news arrives from Asia. And suddenly, this unstoppable, invincible war machine just grinds to a dead halt and begins this long, inevitable retreat all the way back to Karakorum.
So what happened? Well, here is the massive twist of irony. It wasn't a knight in shining armor or some brilliant European military victory that saved the continent. It was politics, thousands of miles away. The great Khan, Ögedei Khan, died. And this immediately throws the whole Mongol Empire into a succession crisis. They had to call a Kurultai, which is a big council, to elect a new great Khan. Batu Khan, being a major player, had no choice but to head back to Karakorum to protect his political interests. No commander trusted the others enough to stay behind. So, literally because of one sudden death in Asia, the invasion just ends, giving a totally shattered Europe a desperate moment to catch its breath.
Which leaves us with this one deeply chilling question. What if Ögedei Khan hadn't died? I mean, think about it. Vienna's walls would have been absolutely useless against Mongol siege engineers. France was already a chaotic mess. The Holy Roman Empire was busy fighting itself. Nobody in the West was even remotely prepared for that kind of speed and brutality. If Ögedei had lived even just 2 or 3 more years, how completely would the history, the culture, and the very map of Europe have been rewritten or completely erased? It really makes you realize just how much of human history hangs on a single, fragile thread, doesn't it?